Hello friends, this is the second of a multi-part series in which I look at the inside of a Baldwin Orga-sonic organ model 54A. It dates from about the mid-1960s. I bought it at a thrift shop for $25 and it includes lots of good components, including a couple of tube amplifiers as well as a small rotating Leslie speaker. The first part of the series, I tested it and evaluated it and determined ultimately that it was not in usable condition, wasn't worth repairing, and therefore needed to be taken apart for salvage. In this video, I'm going to actually do that, take it apart into its major modules while trying to preserve those as much as possible individually. In particular, the tube amplifier in this is valuable for tube amplifier enthusiasts. The speakers are valuable. The Leslie unit is something of interest to me in particular, and it has other pieces including the keyboard and woodwork that might be useful for other projects. So stay tuned and let's go inside the Baldwin Orga-sonic 54A.
Here it is with the top lid unscrewed and taken off. So I put these little tags on the different connectors, ready to pull those off. I might be able to figure out where those go later on, but I won't have to guess or think about it too hard if I have these tags. So there are a few things that are wired in here. There's this wire coming out of this delay amplifier that's captive, at least on this end. Speakers appear to be hardwired in there, so we'll probably just clip the wires at this point and resolder them later if I need to. Don't quite know how the reverb tank is set up here as far as connectors go, but we'll get to that. Well, I've pulled out all the amplifier connectors. Here's something that was kind of a little surprise. This is like a standard two-prong power plug that goes in here, and I didn't quite realize that the main power cord goes in over here and works its way through here, and this is like a secondary power, and that actually makes sense if you think of this Leslie unit as kind of an accessory or a deluxe option. We talked about the fact that this section of the Leslie amplifier looks like kind of an add-on module here with these three screws. And this probably just goes directly to the, it says rotor motor, but you know, so that's what it is. I had thought that this label that says rotor motor applied to this connector, but I didn't look closely enough. And also we haven't talked about this so far, but rotor gain. So basically that's how loud you want the Leslie to be, as kind of a one-time adjustment. So we're just left with a few screws to hold down the main amplifier chassis, and then clipping these speaker wires. That'll be our next step. Here's a little fun thing. What did you do before tie wraps were invented? Well, you use these metal clip things. You had somebody in the factory bend them over with a pair of pliers. Now we're at the moment where I pull the amplifier chassis out. One thing to be aware of in this stage is that these capacitors may still be charged up with high voltages, so I'm not going to be touching the bottom or anything otherwise exposed. Turns out we're still captive over here. So we'll stop and try again. So along with the metal tie downs that I found inside, I also forgot to unplug these two connectors here, which seem to relate to the tone generator unit. Probably one is for the upper rank of keys and the other is for the lower rank of keys. Well, it turns out I had several more cords to deal with, including one that's the main power cord. So here's the main power cord. I believe it's all free now. So let's pull that out. Oh, forgot the pedal. Okay, do that. Okay, now the pedal is free. Try it one more time. Lifting this thing by the transmitters. Yay! Here's something that's kind of fun to notice. The rectangular dark area is the original wood finish, and the lighter area around it is probably the same finish with 50 or 60 years of dust applied. So the next thing I'm going to do is this tone generator assembly on the top, which also contains the switches but not the keys, I believe. Looks like we have a block on each end that kind of frees that up. There's probably more inside, but we'll start with the block. I see now that we've got 4 of these large screws that hold this assembly to this plate. And then there's also on the inside I can see some that may hold to the side. We'll try to take out these 4 screws and see if that's enough. Got enough screws out now that I can lift this entire tone generator assembly, I think. Let's see what obstacles I run into. Looks like we may have to do some more finagling. Well, maybe I should have realized this before, but what I've been calling the tone generator assembly really is just the voice switch assembly. So as you can see, I've cleared out a lot of stuff on this pin block, but it's still holding me up here in the corner. So I'm going to unscrew that, and hopefully that'll allow me to pull some of these cables out. Here's something I read about but didn't know if I'd find here. These are neon bulbs inside here, and those are kind of the key to what's probably a very clever circuit that produces set of waveforms that are used as the oscillator voices. So the context here is that this was during an era where oscillators in effect were expensive because you need a gain element for each oscillator under normal circumstances. Transistors weren't cheap yet. Tubes were never cheap and were always power hungry. So the inventor of this circuit, which I'll provide some references and links for later, created a circuit revolving around neon bulbs, which were relatively cheap but aren't tubes in the normal vacuum tube sense of it. So it looks like this is kind of an oscillator module, and the other modules that we pulled out may be something more of a signal conditioner. So let's take a survey of where we're at. I pulled out this pin block module, pulled out these, I believe they're oscillator modules with the neon bulbs. Got these other modules which may be amplifier or resonator modules, not quite sure. Got a lot of loose wires, and basically I had to do all this destruction, and I still haven't got this top switching unit out. Maybe I'll be able to get that next. And here's something I didn't realize before, but as in a lot of these teardowns, it seems obvious once you know the answer. With all those wires, I couldn't really tell what was going in and out of this reverb tank. And it turns out it's just this pair of RCA inputs and outputs that I had earlier. Very simple. So that's going to be pulled out as a standalone module. I'll fix the springs in the bottom and put the lid back on, clean it up, and that has some value in a future project or for sale. So having tried and failed to get this switching unit out several times, I think I freed it to the point where I can pull it out. We'll see. Yay! Let's take a look at what we've got left. Got some nice key switches here. Could be useful for another project. These two rows can probably come out independently. So I'll probably pull those out next. Now we're ready to lift the top keyboard out, I believe. Let's try again from the other side. Wow, this is surprisingly heavy. Okay, we'll have to regroup on that. So now we're going to take off what I saw referred to online as the cheeks. Here's one cheek with a panorama switch, and that goes directly to the reverb amplifier. Here's the other cheek. I don't think that has anything underneath it except possibly some mechanical components. Oh, got one more to do there. So here's the other cheek. I'm going to turn the other cheek. As I suspected, just a wood block. This one has the switch for the they call it panoramic tone. It's really reverb. It's marketing buzz. So here's the back side of the so-called panoramic tone, which is basically the reverb switch. This line goes directly to the reverb amplifier. Got some resistors here that probably change the gain as a function of the switch setting. You can see now that each side of this has some screws under here that screw the metal frame of the keyboard switches into the wood frame of the overall organ. Now these two keyboards are linked by some sort of cable. If I had any sense I would have just cut that and dealt with them separately, but here we are. So with the panoramic tone control, also known as the reverb control, pulled out, we're in a position to work on the reverb amplifier, which is right here. I've got this wire loose that's permanently attached to the reverb amplifier, and we're able to pull the reverb amplifier out. Well, this is a nice touch. If you think about how they might have assembled this thing, let's say this was pre-installed on the cheek, and I'm doing it backwards, but you could have slid the cheek up through there, and this reverb amplifier with control and cheek could all have been one pre-made assembly. So I put the reverb amplifier aside. We can just take a quick look at the underside of it. Lots of discrete hand-wired components, as is true of an amplifier of this type, a tube amplifier. It also came with this cover plate, which helps us with safety as well as electrical shielding. Probably more the latter. As a further point, with the reverb amplifier right here next to this Leslie motor, there's probably a lot of electrical noise coming off the Leslie motor. We've got a piece of 1/4-inch plywood here which wouldn't stop it, so that shielding was probably necessary for electrical reasons. Inside the box and up against wood probably wasn't a safety issue. So as our next step, we're going to take out these big speakers. So here we've got the speakers out. I put the nuts back on to save as future use, maybe, if I end up reusing these panels. I was kind of surprised at how thin this speaker cloth is, you know, you can see right through it to the other side. So that doesn't, obviously speaker cloth like this is not supposed to affect the sound. It's just cosmetic and protective. But anyway, this is, seems like fairly strong stuff. You know, there's a problem of punching through it, but just with a little light pressure, it seems pretty strong. And the front on this is really in good condition. So this cloth itself might be another reuse item or a sales item. My next element to take out will be this reverb tank. It has these problems with the springs on the bottom, but I can fix that. This certainly has some sort of reuse or resale value. So now I'm taking out this rail that held the tone generator modules. That probably doesn't have any reuse value unless I try to reconstruct the tone generator. But we'll keep it and set it aside for now. Here's the reverb tank out and ready to be worked on separately. Really getting things cleared out down here. This is the cable assembly from the foot pedals. Now I started to work on this panel here, which has the foot pedals underneath it, and I realized I never had a metal plate at this point under the main amplifier. So that proves my theory that the shield over here for the reverb amplifier was for noise purposes, not for electrical noise, that is, and not for safety, because this doesn't have a similar plate, probably doesn't have any electrical noise issues in this area, and of course wood is an insulating material, so doesn't pose a safety concern. Let's take off this wooden panel and see what's underneath. This is the assembly that has to do with the foot pedals. So down here I see we've got a lot of these little direct contact switches. These may be some mechanical hardware and height adjustments. Here it's a little hard to see from this angle, but we'll pull it out soon. Some sort of tone conditioning board. I thought this tone module would have the pull-off single pin connectors like we've been seeing on the other modules, but it doesn't. It has soldered on cables. I can see reusing the foot switch assembly possibly, but not this tone module. So what I'm going to do is cut it off right here to kind of preserve all the wires as is. I can match the colors up later if I want to, but otherwise the tone module can go here. Turns out there's some rather nasty decayed foam on the bottom of this. Not surprising after 50 or so years. Here's what was probably part of a mouse nest that was over in the corner. On these keyboards I've had a lot of trouble getting them out. There's basically 6 bolts holding the bottom one into the wood frame, and these are joined together by this electrical cord. I don't know why they would be joined together per se, except that that's probably part of the overall voicing mechanism of the unit. So I've decided to make this easier, I'm going to snip these two apart, and probably in any kind of reuse project they would be separated anyway, and there's no reason to believe that the wiring that they have between them is of any use to me in a new design. So that'll be the next thing. We'll snip this apart and pull off the top keyboard. So for about the 4th time I'm going to try pulling off this top keyboard. I think it's totally separated now. We'll find out. Snag here in the back. There we go. I can show you these screws that have been giving me so much trouble. This one right here, this one, and there's another one under here, but we shall overcome. Finally got this lower keyboard unit out. That was quite a chore because of 3 wood screws here on each side that were really hard as far as angle and blockage and so on to get something on that would unscrew them. But we've done that now, and I thought this panel might be free. This is the speaker panel, but something's still going on there, so we'll work on that. Well, there's some more screws holding the speaker panel on from inside the Leslie unit, so that's the next thing. After pulling out a bunch more screws, I think we're finally ready to take this unit loose. Looks like there's a trick. Okay, we got it. So now we have the speaker grill and this plate with the Leslie that we can reuse for another project. Now, as you can see, we're down to just a few things that are electrical. Basically, the Leslie unit is the only thing left in the pedal assembly. Some miscellaneous hardware, and then we're down to the frame after that. Been looking at the Leslie and how to get that out, and it looks like taking this plate off the front is going to be helpful for that. The Leslie assembly is more or less all of the black pieces here, and it goes all the way down below this sound vent here. But I think it'll come out as a unit, but I have to free it from the larger chassis, like you can see over here. I had to temporarily at least remove the speaker to get to these 3 bolts that are holding the Leslie unit to the overall chassis. Now, as part of that, actually this left side of the case is in effect part of the Leslie unit because it forms the wall as well as these vent holes. So this is going to be kind of structurally unsound by the time I take it out, but we can fit a piece of plywood on that side or something. It's just got plywood on this side. The whole thing's built out of plywood basically. What I could do potentially is reuse this side of the case, and I might do that, but this is kind of a nice high quality wood of some kind, and may make more sense to do something else with that. It's also quite heavy, and lightening this up, if it doesn't affect the sound, is a good thing. Now, another thing I found along the way was this speaker has a code on it. The top part, A51303138A, is the Baldwin, I almost said Hammond, the Baldwin part number probably, but we've got 285414, which I know from one of the other speakers, I've already looked it up. 285 is the manufacturer code for Rolla, R-O-L-A, which was a major speaker company which made one of the other 2 speakers that I've got. So we've got this last digit year of 4 and 14 for the week number. That doesn't really mean much to us, but I'm guessing the speaker was made in '64. So that kind of takes us to, if I assume an overall decade of 1960s for this unit, and the speaker was made before the whole unit, then maybe the unit was made in 1965 or so. But I still don't have any firm information to prove that. That's more of a guess. So one of the limiting factors on the speaker, I've got these two small wires that come up here to screws on top. And that's kind of a mysterious thing, because the screws on top, you can imagine, might be used for some sort of signal monitoring or something by a repair technician. But if you have the back off of it, you could get to the speaker terminals, which originally, I've cut them, but originally had these large gauge wires that was really delivering the power. So these are just sense wires. Frankly, I don't see any sense in them anymore, so I'm going to just cut them off and free up the speaker, but the speaker most likely will go back in later. I ended up taking the side off of the Leslie unit completely, which leaves me, as far as exterior woodwork, only the grill on the front and the side that I damaged in the cutting process. I'm hoping to reuse the sides maybe, or I may scrap this plan and in fact make an entire new box for it. One thing I might do is try to improve the noise proofing on the cheese wheel motor that you see here. So we'll take that as a separate project and a separate video. But this is where we stand right now, and this is small enough, as well as other miscellaneous pieces I've kind of laid out in the garage here, that I can put those away somewhere neatly and use the garage again. Winter's approaching and it's going to be needed for that. So I think this completes our disassembly video. I'm going to find ways to repurpose or resell the different components that you see here, as well as some that I've already put away. So one thing I hope to do in a future video is to put together schematics of these modules and figure out how they work and string enough of them together to make some tones based on what they are. So I hope you'll stick with me on future videos. That ends this video. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.